This is NHTV2, North Haven Government Television, a service of North Haven Community Television. The following program is brought to you through the support of the Town of North Haven.
Good evening. I'd like to convene the Tuesday, May 22nd, 2017 North Haven Fire Commission meeting. I'd like to ask for approval of the minutes of for April 24th, 2018.
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Any question on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So moved. The chief's report.
Chief's report for this month, we're going to start off with alarms. Year-to-date 2017, at this time, we were at 1,717 incidents. Year-to-date, as of close of day yesterday, was 1,804 incidents, a difference of 87 alarms. Something to keep in mind as a variable is the weather incident we had come through here on May 15th. That's limited to only a couple of incidents, and the reason for that is our dispatch starts getting so overwhelmed with so many incidents coming in, and we don't punch a separate number for every single incident. So we end up on one or two incidents having a number of addresses listed that we had to provide service to or assess for damage or rescue occupants, rescue people from cars, whatever. It all still is one or two incidents and for that period of time. So, you know, in theory, it should really be 75 more alarms, but then again, that's still because of that one day. So just something to keep in mind. We responded to about 75 different incidents during that storm and continue to respond to incidents now that we're in the recovery stage. But I just wanted to put that disclaimer out there about the incidents. They do not account for that.
Chief, are we able to go back into the system and recalculate that so that way we would have, you know, correct documentation as far as calls are concerned, rather than the 1804?
So we could. The problem is anytime that you create an incident number, you're supposed to have times that go with the incident number. And without going back and listening to every single audio message and tape that was recorded, it just, I don't know how beneficial that would be to do. We have it in the narrative in different portions of the report that break it down, that show where we went, what addresses, but there's no time because it's all happening so fast. And quite honestly, any dispatch center for that matter, unless you're in a county dispatch center with, you know, dozens of dispatchers, would be able to keep up with that type of entry for times.
So if we added 75 to this 1804 with our own calculations, that would be pretty accurate?
Yeah, that would be pretty accurate. But don't forget as well, this unfortunately is the third time this has occurred in 4 years. And
right.
I'm sure the same type of calls, you know, occurred, and the same type of documentation occurred. So it's kind of it's what we normally do.
Okay.
Yeah. Since our last Board of Fire Commission meeting, we provided intercept to the hospital 16 different times, one transport, and we responded to the highway on 13 different occasions. The highway, again, for North Haven, I'm referring to as Route 40, I-91, and Route 15.
Sorry, how many times?
13. Regarding some of the more significant events that have occurred since our last meeting, there's been several. To kind of highlight some of the ones that are probably worth discussing tonight briefly. The incident on Quinnipiac Avenue that occurred definitely stressed the resources of the town, and definitely put our command decisions and so forth that we had to make on a lot of stress on that. There was a high level of threats that were occurring. The incident was evolving by the minute as more intel became available. But all in all, the reason that incident, and I'll go on record as saying the reason that incident was handled as well as it was because of the awesome relationship the police department and the fire department have in this town. The fact that we were asked to be on scene and invited to be part of the command post that the police had, this was a police incident only up until the time of the explosion, is why that incident unfolded as well as it did for us. It still stressed us. It still definitely had us double back on a few different tactics that we had to take. but arriving there on scene ahead of it and being informed of what was taking place and why decisions were being made by the police department, and then subsequently the explosion is a big reason why that incident went the way that it did. And unified command was tremendous. We had a number of area towns that showed up, both police and fire. There were hundreds of police officers there. We had state agencies, federal agencies, and they just kept coming. In a situation like that, there's typically a power struggle that occurs. If you read about this on a national level, that didn't happen in this case. It was very, very structured, very uniformed, and very decisive in how we went about attacking the incident. So, a couple of thanks to some surrounding departments, the New Haven Fire, Hampton Fire, North Branford, Wallingford, and Guilford Fire all provided apparatus, personnel, or equipment that evening, whether it be for town coverage or whether it be for the incident that was unfolding, as well as a few cooperating agencies, which included American Red Cross, and I have to give a compliment to American Medical Response, who was able to respond with a number of ambulances in a very short period of time to begin on treatment that was needed for our officers, and to begin to make sure that we had enough ambulances there in case additional injuries were to occur. So regarding Quinnipiac Avenue, that was an incident that we're still putting together our after incident analysis. We're still working to go through all the tapes and so forth, and perhaps in the near future there will be something a little more formal to go over. Regarding the tornado that went through on May 15th, this again tested the town's abilities to respond. We mentioned quickly the number of incidents that we had. Unfortunately, this is the third time we've had something like this, and you begin to realize as the calls start coming in and the 911 calls start coming in, how much is taking place in a short few minutes, and usually in an isolated area of town. So the department responded accordingly and had a number of units, and we were on scene through the evening, going through neighborhoods, knocking on doors, and making sure people are okay and people weren't trapped, and letting them know where places where they can go for help. So there were some other incidents as well. We had a couple of significant fires. We had a couple of fatal accidents. But those, I think, are the two that kind of grabbed the news headlines over the last month or so, and I wanted to highlight. Regarding the breakdown of calls, 60% of our calls were EMS related. And again, I keep hearing how the department does mostly medicals from people that don't follow these meetings. 60% of our calls being medicals, while the majority is medicals. It's not mostly medicals. So, and that we're usually between 60 and 65%. Approximately 359 incidents since our last meeting, 92 of which were overlapping, which accounts for 26% of our incidents overlapping. Again, this is due to not only the number of calls, but in some cases the nature of the call. Some calls taking longer to remain on scene than others. That's regarding alarms. Regarding training, we've been going over the aerial truck. So what's going to become Truck 2, that'll be positioned back with here at Northeast for the volunteers out of this company to be using, as well as another company that will be cross-trained. That's something that's going to take some time. Driving an engine is nothing like driving an aerial truck. So we're spending a lot of time on training volunteers. There's been quite a number of drills focusing on our boat and our operations on the Quinnipiac River and getting out to New Haven Harbor and back up into Wallingford. There's been a number of days where we've had training with the boat, and with the incidents we've been responding to, sometimes some of the best training that we can do is sitting down and looking at our response and critiquing ourselves. So we spent several days since this last meeting going over what seems to be one incident after another and learning from it and figuring out what we need to do to be better. Our budget at this point, we are at 96.6% spent. As compared to last year at this time, it was 98.5% spent. And since our last Board of Fire Commission meeting, we've collected $94,480 in permit fees in the last month. This brings us to just above $1.2 million since we began to collect fees. Regarding our inspections, 37 different inspections, 10 re-inspections from prior visits, which totals 47. 11 code violations were found, 5 of which have since been corrected. We've issued 1 abatement order, and we've processed 45 different permits. I have a few items to discuss during the executive session, and that is all I have at this time for a chief's report.
Any questions of the chief regarding his report?
Did we, were there any 911 emergency calls going on at the time of this Quinnipiac incident?
Yes, there were.
And how were those handled?
Those were handled with AMR, solely AMR, as all of headquarters personnel were obligated at that scene for a good period of time.
And do we still have a member on the SWAT team?
We do, and the member that was on the SWAT team was present that evening, and along with other members of the SWAT team. So to ensure the commission is aware of that, we have a firefighter paramedic who's integrated into the South Central SWAT team, as well as a paramedic from surrounding fire departments. I think they have a total of 4 or 5, and they were on scene that evening, and they were the first ones to render care to the injured officers and did a tremendous job. I was standing next to them at the command post when the explosion occurred, and as you would expect, without hesitation, they ran right in to begin rendering care. They train with them every time the SWAT team trains, the medics train. They are truly part of that team, from a operations standpoint, right on down to a member of the team in terms of how close they are.
Chief, I would like to add to what you said about the explosion. I was on the scene for several hours, and I would like to thank the North Haven Fire Chiefs, the professional firefighters, the volunteers, the fire police, and our policemen, the state police. Everyone did an exceptional job. Even the surrounding towns that came in with all that equipment, everything ran in. You couldn't get it to run any smoother, in my opinion. Everyone did their job.
Commissioner, you mentioned the fire police, and just to kind of capitalize on that for a moment, the fire police, perhaps in that one scene, proved their worth for the next decade. When you have that kind of incident where a majority of our police officers are tied up doing other things after that, or were involved in the incident directly, we need help in securing the scene and in making sure that people don't get by. And you can only imagine the number of legitimate and illegitimate resources that were showing up and people that were showing up. And the fire police was able to keep everybody back, establish a perimeter, establish crowd control. And to be honest, one of the weaknesses that you see when you look at this at a national level and you study these different incidents, what typically is a issue is crowd control and access control to the scene, because we're talking about a crime scene essentially is what it became. And what we were able to do for North Haven was maintain that perimeter. In fact, we were complimented by several state and federal agencies that tried to get through that line, that were not allowed to get through that line until they showed some form of identification. And I give the fire police members a lot of credit for maintaining their ground in that type of environment, sending people back to their cars to get their IDs. Whether they were upset or not, they knew it was the right thing to do. And that goes for fire and police that were arriving on scene. So that certainly proved its worth that evening.
Were the newly graduated CERT folks on site too?
So, yeah, and I didn't mention CERT intentionally because it's unfinished business, but there were. We had the CERT team there, yes, sir. Yep.
Well, certainly on behalf of this commission, I want to express our deep appreciation for you, Chief, and the chiefs that were there, and for all the men and women in our town and all the surrounding towns that came to our aid. And we certainly have had the police officers on the regional SWAT team in our thoughts and prayers. And thank goodness all of them are home from the excuse me, all of them are home from the hospital, and some of them are still on the mend, and we certainly wish them well. But it just, these couple of incidents that have occurred are exactly the the meat of the conversation that we have had over the last period of time during the budget cycle. And as we're all aware, Mike Frieda required us to do an analysis of our current needs of the department and our future needs. And we always talked about the God forbid, what if scenario. And certainly these last few weeks have tested our resolve. We did the best we could with the manpower and equipment that we have, and certainly are thankful that our neighbors came in to assist us, during the time of need. But the truth of the matter is, what we were saying throughout this entire budget cycle is that the fire department responds for fires, tornadoes, explosions, whatever it might be, and we certainly need the manpower and the equipment in order to take care of whatever those emergencies are. And unfortunately, our equipment is horrendously expensive. And I know we're going to talk about the budget, a little bit later on down the line here. But all of what we have spoken about over the last months really led up to what the needs of the department currently are and what the future needs will be, in order to make sure that we have sufficient manpower and equipment to handle emergencies such as this. So, but again, on behalf of our commission, thank you, chiefs. Please pass along our appreciation to our men and women in the service, and certainly our brother police officers, again, have been in our thoughts and prayers, and so we really appreciate that.
Definitely, for sure.
Any other comments or thoughts?
I just want to thank the chief for bringing in $1.2 million in the fire marshal's office. I mean, that is a great
It's a lot of money.
accomplishment. I don't mean to take away from what we just spoke.
No, absolutely not.
But this is a big number, 1.2 million. And this is,
In a year and a half's time?
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's incredible. You need to be commended for that.
Yeah.
I think that's great. And the town should look at this. When we ask for something, this is $1 million you put into the coffers. They didn't have. Anyways,
Yeah.
that
I
being
want to
said,
thank the fire police for informing the people as to how they could get to different places, what was open, what was closed. So,
Should get a raise.
just so that they know that the roads are closed and where they're closed.
Sure.
Yeah, the communication that came out from the command center, I'm assuming, and funneled down to whomever in order to distribute it to the residents of the town were phenomenal. And I'm sure, as Commissioner Capucci indicated, he was on the scene. There were a number of us, obviously, that weren't. There were calls that were coming in from all, from many residents to each of us, and I know we were all communicating back and forth to folks. And it was just marvelous to be able to have that open line of communication so that people they were really nervous and concerned about what was going on, especially with the explosion, and certainly the tornado as well. But that open line of communication was really important to make sure that our residents were informed.
I think the fire police, in my experience, I was driving and he said, okay, where do you live? And he explained that, okay, now you can't go any farther than this. So, I mean, it was a big help to know that, all right, you're not going to get down that road.
Yeah.
Right.
How many fire police do we have right now, Chief?
We're at about 10, 11.
Okay. Well, again, our deepest appreciation to all that participated in both of those tragic events. I'll accept a motion to accept the chief's report.
so moved.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Any question on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So moved. Correspondence. Has any correspondence been received, Chief?
Correspondence, other than the routine day-to-day correspondence, with typical business, I've received nothing of significance. I do want to just mention that we've had an outpouring of support from the community. I don't mean to keep talking about this, but I do want to recognize the community. We're trying to keep up with the number of donations. People and businesses just dropping by to say thank you, sending cards in the mail, putting food at the stations last several weeks based on all the incidents. It's just overwhelming, and it's so good to see that community support, and I think it's important that membership see that as well. And we're trying to identify those that want to identify themselves so that we can send them a thank you, but it's really becoming overwhelming, and we're thankful for their generosity.
Any commissioners receive any communications?
I'd just like to say that the response on social media goes to the chief's point. It's just, it's not unfortunate, but it gives me some pause to wonder why we can't get the things we ask for when incidents like this occur. I mean, a truck, a couple of firefighters, no, something like this happens, and everybody comes out of the woodwork with praise and thanks, and we appreciate that. But we need what we need, and it's not what we want, it's what we need. And we just, every year, seem to come up against a brick wall. And now, incidents like this occur, we come to the forefront of the conversation in town. I just hope that we maintain that position as the topic of discussion in coffee shops and diners and wherever, and people will rally around the fire service and the police service. This is what happens. Incidents like this is what wakes people up. And it just saddens me to think that we go every year and ask for things that we need, and every year we are told no. So, I mean, sooner or later, it's not going to be anybody to come to the fire because we don't have a way to get there. And I just hope that the town can put pressure on the folks that need pressure to be placed on them to come to their senses next year, because this isn't the last we've seen of this type of stuff. And I just hope we can increase our fire service and the police service, because public safety is at the forefront right now.
Thank you, Commissioner. I received a correspondence through Chaplain Detweiler. I should say he received a correspondence, and he asked that I acknowledge that at this next commission meeting. The Chaplain Detweiler from Hope Church has been our chaplain now for a couple of years, and he indicated to me that for the first time ever, he received a thank you note from a person that he helped during an emergency. And he was just absolutely overwhelmed with appreciation that the person took it upon themselves to write this note and to thank him for being there at their time of need. I looked for his email in my phone, but unfortunately, in order to read the letter, I couldn't find it. But anyway, I wanted to acknowledge the fact that Chaplain Detweiler did receive an acknowledgement for his service, and it was deeply appreciated. Unfinished business of the fire department.
Unfinished business. I have on here CERT, and I've intentionally left it here. The CERT team that we have in North Haven has been activated twice since the last meeting, and I recall saying to you in the past that we'd be lucky to activate them once a year, and here we are within a month's time. They've been activated twice. The CERT team was activated to provide a refuge for residents surrounding the Quinnipiac Avenue incident on May 2nd. The Mount Louise Firehouse became our staging area for incoming fire apparatus, and also became what I'm going to refer to as an area of refuge, and I'm using those words carefully because I don't want to say shelter. It takes on a different meaning for all the residents that we had to evacuate. We gave them some place to go to get picked up from family and friends, charge their phones, get themselves together and so forth. Their CERT team certainly provided aid to the individuals that needed it. As I also activated through the Hamden Emergency Management Director, the Hamden CERT team. I'd like to thank them as well. The Hamden CERT team is able to mobilize, whereas our team cannot mobilize yet. One of the things that we have in this budget that was approved is a CERT vehicle, and we continue as we build this team to get supplies, and we'll get there. Hamden CERT team's been around now for a number of years, so it'll take us some time to get to where Hamden is, but we did have to activate the Hamden CERT team to bring things to that station. On May 15th, during the tornado, we actually used the CERT team once again, North Haven solely this time, and staffed the North Haven High School, which is set up as our designated shelter for the town. However, we just need to work on furthering some plans for that and hardening that facility and the contents to make it a shelter a little bit more. So it served as, again, an area of refuge for those that needed to charge their phones, were without power for a long time, and so forth. So the CERT team has stepped up, and while they're small in numbers, they're big at heart, and they continue to want to do more. And you'll see them again out this summer, and you'll see them recruiting and having out a class in the fall. And as we begin to move this program forward, I believe it's going to be one of the best CERT teams in the area. The ladder truck, we have representatives from the fire department that are going to be on site at that facility tonight through Friday, conducting a final inspection of the apparatus, and it is due to arrive to Connecticut sometime next week, probably early next week. They're going to wait to get through the holiday traffic, and at that point it'll be up in Hartford at our vendor, and he'll have all of the equipment and so forth installed, and I expect to have that our members trained on it within the next 2 weeks and have it in service there shortly after. So we're doing real well at the ladder truck. We're looking forward to having it here, and we'll start making some changes to get truck 2 to this location. We're going to call it a tower because it has a bucket on it, and it differentiates that apparatus from what we have now. They are 2 different apparatus. While they both have a ladder on top, they provide 2 operationally different advantages and disadvantages. The FEMA assisted to firefight applications are still in, they're still pending. I understand the review, nationwide peer review process was last week. We have yet to be notified of an award. It's not saying that it's going to happen. We've been this far in the process before and unfortunately haven't been successful. But at this point, typically 50% of the applications have been kicked back. So it means we're at least in the running. We made it to peer review. This is for 2 grants. This was for approximately 30 sets of structural firefighting gear with a washer and dryer, which is desperately needed. And the second grant was for another engine. So we hope to hear more on that as the next few months go on, and I probably won't update the commission until we hear further on a yes or a no. Regarding EMS billing, this process started November 1st of 2017. We have approximately $91,000 in billable expenses that we have out. We've collected just over $5,600. The reason for that marginal difference is it takes several months to develop the relationship with the insurance companies, get the paperwork in order, and so forth, and work with our vendors that we have set up for this EMS billing. You're going to start to see over the next month or two a lot of money to start narrowing that margin, and it will just continue coming in from this point on. It just takes several months to get this going and to get Medicare processing numbers taken care of, direct deposit account numbers taken care of, and so forth. Agreements signed, there's a lot to this. So the billable expenses of $91,000 is there, and we expect to collect a great deal of that, if not all of it. Regarding the rescue, last month I mentioned to this board that we were having some trouble with Rescue 1. It was out of service for approximately 2 weeks. It went to Nutmeg International to have warranty work done on the brake system, so it was at no cost to the town of North Haven. It's been back in service now for a couple of weeks, and we haven't experienced any similar issues to it. So we're hoping the issue was resolved, and we have both rescues at this point operational.
Chief, did Rescue 1 also have an electrical issue, or was it just the brake issue?
It was an electrical issue within the braking system.
Oh, okay, that's
so
what
which it was, I don't know yet.
Got it.
And that's all I have for unfinished business.
Any question of the chief regarding unfinished business? With the permission of this commission, I'd certainly like the chief to forward to each of the departments a thank you letter on our behalf for their assistance during the explosion, and certainly if any of them assisted us during the tornado.
Sure.
I certainly would appreciate that.
Sure.
Is that all okay?
Perfect.
All right.
Good idea.
Good. New business of the fire department.
New business, I only have one item listed here. It is the annual hose testing. Traditionally, the fire department staff have conducted hose testing. We contracted out for another company this year to do hose testing, an outside third-party vendor, which I think is the best thing to do because it keeps us an arm's length away from it. God forbid something catastrophic ever were to occur to our hose, it's important that we have an outside third agency to certify that the hose is functional, operational, and it was tested to standards. So with that, what we had them do was test all the hose in the fleet, which is an annual requirement per NFPA 1962 standards. We did experience a great deal of hose that was placed out of service. A majority of that is because the hose is prior to 1987. It was manufactured prior to 1987, which automatically takes it out of service. So some of that we are expecting. Others kind of caught us off guard, but we've changed around some of our operational tactics that we're doing right now, and we're down to no spare hose. But this next fiscal year, we'll work to do a hose purchase, and we're going to use some funds from this year and just slowly start adding to the inventory. It's probably better that we start buying a little bit of hose at a time than a mass purchase of hose, because that's only going to catch up with us later as well. So between what's finishing up to be this fiscal year and next fiscal year, we'll start getting our hose back to where it needs to be, our hose inventory. And there's also a possibility that I can get some hose donated. There's departments out there that replace hose every 10 years. No matter how much it's been used, if it's 10 years old, it gets replaced. We haven't replaced hose since before 1987. So I'm going to try to use perhaps some of the hose. I'm going to try to use some of the hose
31 years ago.
that's 10 years old, that still meets the standard and still passes, but some departments prefer to have newer hose. And if that can get us through for a couple of years, then I'll certainly do that. So I should have that available to us soon.
Chief, did we have any mechanical breakdowns or malfunctions or, during the explosion? I know we had all of our apparatus and personnel on scene. How did all that work?
There were no maintenance issues that took anything out of service that I'm aware of. Engine 3, which is our oldest engine, which is 33 years old, was the engine that we use because it's our callback engine. So what happened with that evening is we were initially called to provide EMS support with the rescues that we had an issue with at that point. I actually called back 4 firefighters for that incident to staff our spare reserve engine, which is engine 3, and that engine was on scene at the time of the explosion, and it provided the initial suppression efforts, being 30 some odd years old. So that's something that we struggled with because it's not set up to for all of what we were looking for to do in terms of unmanned devices and the equipment and the tools and so forth. We made it work. It would have been nice to have had, this goes back to the conversation, we need to have a fleet of apparatus that's newer, reliable, dependable, and has all the equipment on it that we needed to have on it. We weren't carrying the equipment 35 years ago that we're carrying today, so it can't carry some of that equipment. In terms of maintenance issues, there were none that I've been made aware of, nor do I'm confident there were none that played a role in that incident. It just, operationally, we could have used a newer engine there.
In the replacement of the hose, and I know we have been moving from a smaller diameter hose to a larger diameter hose. That's our plan moving forward?
That is, yeah. So what you're referring to is we've gone from a 3-inch supply line on our engines to a 5-inch supply line. And we continue to move forward with that effort.
Okay. Any other questions of the chief?
Yes, I would like to ask the chief. Most departments, when they have a large emergency such as the explosion, generally they have a mechanic on the scene in case something does go wrong. Can we somehow, I can't say order, but get one of our public works mechanics, if another emergency happens like this, on a standby. Is that possible?
It's something we could look into. I have some reservations on it because I don't know that public works mechanics are certified to work on fire apparatus. If you go back to that NFPA standard that was just recently passed, it's been a subject of conversation quite a bit in terms of our apparatus. House Bill 7047, which directly referenced the NFPA standard for apparatus, it requires anybody who touches a fire apparatus to be certified in working on fire apparatus. What we need to revisit, perhaps next fiscal year or soon thereafter, is, as what's been tried in the past, is getting a mechanic on the fire department, so that we can have our own mechanic who we can stop outsourcing all this and stop paying a premium on the hourly rate and on the parts markup. There's a huge cost for that, and we can start having somebody provide our own maintenance to our fleet, who has a vested interest in it, who's working on it, and is available. You're right, in a lot of departments, you have the mechanic who gets dispatched on a second alarm to the fires, so that if there's a saw that's not working, a fan that's not working, the engine stops working, the pump stops working, he's on site, and he not only can he see it so he knows what's wrong and he knows how to fix it, but perhaps, and most of the time, he can fix it right then and there. So it is something that we should look at. It's just something that I'm still working on preparing the numbers, and it's something that we should definitely revisit, though.
You know, that's a very interesting question, Commissioner, and I know, as we all know, that discussion took place during the renovation and building of our fire stations. There was a question as to whether or not we should have a bay that would have a pit that we would be able to drive the engine over, and the mechanic would be able to work underneath. Obviously, because of financial issues and space, that didn't happen. But that discussion took place, and further discussion took place regarding the use of the public works mechanics. But as the chief clearly articulated, they don't have the credentials to work on the fire apparatus as that's required. So, thank you for bringing that question up. I think it's a very important question, and Chief, your comments about, you know, the markup on the hourly compensation and the markup on parts is a huge number. I mean, when you look at apparatus at the age that our apparatus is at, for parts, if we can get parts after a 30 years old vehicle, that's a big number, and it takes a lot of mechanical skill and expertise. And Mary Jane, you can speak to this. Owning a repair shop. The older the vehicle, the more maintenance that's necessary, I'm sure. So I think that would be an interesting financial analysis to do, even if we took a look at what the expenses for the previous year has been in hours worked on the vehicle and parts that were ordered, and figured a 50% markup on parts and whatever the hourly, whatever the labor cost would be. And I think in our next workshop, that might be something that we would propose to the Board of Finance. But again, I think, as Commissioner Zuccarelli indicated, we're having difficulty getting fire trucks and firefighters, let alone potentially to bring a mechanic on board. I think those are the kind of exercises that the senior management of this department, and certainly the commissioners, are looking to do in order to try to save residents of this town monies, and tax monies, and to spend them wisely, and we certainly do that. But I think that's an exercise that would be very interesting.
It's definitely worth visiting, yeah.
It's an exercise in futility.
Well, yeah, I think.
Chief, I don't know if they ever saved any of the notes, if they're anywhere in the archives, or they just went into a trash pail. That was brought up during Chief Marola.
Oh.
And we did a study. I brought the numbers in for Fleet Pride. And Fleet Pride brought us in, it was 100% markup on the parts.
Oh, is that right?
You're buying a $30 filter, and they're charging us $59 for it. And they're charging us $95 an hour for labor. So we broke it down, and it came out if you hired a mechanic at $1,000 a week, it's half the cost for labor and half the cost for parts. And they could work on the vehicles besides our apparatus, the chief's vehicle, and whatever. And if they weren't busy, if they did not get busy, they could even work on the police vehicles, changing oil, whatever. And it was a tremendous savings, and finance department knocked it down.
You know, the thing is, it's not even, it is a financial incentive for the town as well. It's also an operational. What you have right now is you have a vendor, when we do put this out to bid, in fact, I went out to bid as recently, within the last year it went out to bid. It's not quite as bad in terms of the markups. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but it's not that bad. It's the operations as well. What we do right now, we send it to a vendor, all of our fleet, and we have to wait in line for everybody else who's there, you know? So it's no different than you send a car to a mechanic. He's not gonna get to it that day necessarily, you know? So we end up waiting several days sometimes just to get the apparatus to start getting worked on. So our downtime on apparatus is significant. You also have, and this isn't our vendor that we're using this necessarily, but all vendors, you have a lot of vendors that there's a mechanic somewhere in there, but the mechanic may not be the one working on your truck the entire time. Maybe somebody else who's helping. So again, it's having that vested interest in the apparatus, somebody who knows the apparatus, knows the fleet well, and knows how to get things back in service so that we eliminate our downtime. You know, we've been over this before as during previous meetings. We've come very close, and nothing's really changed this budget year. We've come very close to shutting down a volunteer station in this last fiscal year, because we end up with an aged fleet that's coming up on so much maintenance, and its downtime is just incredible that I have no more engines left.
Well,
When you cite the things that can go wrong at a fire scene, the saw breaks, this breaks, that breaks, all those things are gonna break sooner or later, because they're so old.
Sure.
So, you know, and I just hope you're not putting a fire out in my house when that happens. You know what I mean? It's just, I just don't get it.
well, and again, I think, you know, we've made our points, we've discussed our needs. Obviously, the Board of Finance didn't feel that all of what our requests were worthy of being included in this year's budget. We're all aware that the budget did pass, and certainly, you know, we salvaged some of what the requests were. You know, it definitely was a very difficult budget year with what's going on with the state, and certainly with all of the other requests. And our residents truly, you know, didn't want to have a tax increase, and there was one. It was minimal, but it would have been more had they added the request from our department and others. So as we'll do with the manpower and the equipment that we have, the best that we possibly can do. And I think that's all that we can do.
Where does the 1.2 million go? That's what I wanna know. It doesn't come to the fire department.
No,
Right.
no,
Back over there.
I want to say that went into the general fund in order
That
to,
mystical wonderland
Yeah,
known as the general fund.
in order to probably reduce the increase in whatever the mill rate would have been.
Right.
Yeah.
But it didn't help the fire department. That's the bottom line.
Well, you know, the discussion throughout, and I know we got off the good of the department here, which is part of it anyway. The discussion throughout the budget cycle was that the fire department had the largest percentile increase in this budget than any other department. I want to say that it was around 70%. 70%. You know, I want to be quick to say that increase was as a result of the Board of Finance finally, after many, many years of our current chief and previous chiefs, suggesting and recommending that the collective bargaining benefit cost be taken out of the overtime
Exactly.
and put in its proper place. And I think, and I know that in this year's budget, it's the first time in the history of this town that has in fact been done. And that's where the majority of that 8% increase was allocated.
Right.
Those were for all of the benefits that the firefighters receive, whether it be sick time, vacation time.
That's
you know,
contractual.
all contractual.
Well, contractual.
Our overtime line item historically has been, that dollar figure is around $60,000, Chief?
Yeah, this budget, I believe, is 66,000, and that's based on some of the unknowns that can occur, like with this last couple of weeks.
Right.
But, so many callbacks for fire incidents, and so much, coverage for training when training has to be done off-site, things
Right.
of that nature.
Right.
Yeah.
So, there were many residents in the Board of Finance were deeply concerned about the over-budget, if you will, that we have been experiencing year after year. And this department, our chief, has been criticized for not managing the budget sufficiently, when in fact it was never the chief's fault. It was always the way that the Board of Finance did the accounting.
They manipulated our numbers.
Well, they didn't manipulate them. They didn't appropriately budget for the collective bargaining benefits.
Exactly.
And so for this first year, this budget coming up in July is the first budget that has ever been appropriately funded. So from this point forward, my expectation is that the North Haven Fire Department will have a balanced budget. We'll have a budget, we will live within our budget, except for potentially any extraordinary experiences. Two 30-year-old fire engines that could blow up any time would require us to come to the Board of Finance and make a request for a replacement. But I think that's something that we would do down the line. So it's kind of interesting how this whole thing has taken place. But the truth of the matter is, yes, we did receive probably the highest percentile increase that any other department has, but we still have the lowest budget in town as far as department is concerned. Am I correct with that, by saying that, Chief?
It depends how you divide it up. We're one of the lowest.
Okay.
There's certainly departments that are higher than us, yeah,
Okay.
but it depends on how you look at it.
But anyway, I think we beat the budget to death, and and we're fortunate that it passed, and we're gonna move forward in the year to come, and we will continue to report to the residents and certainly to the first selectman the needs of this department. Anything else for the under new business? Discussion of the good of the fire department.
Go to the department, I have one item listed on your agenda. It's that this current week is EMS week. Nationally, it's the time that we recognize EMS workers for the hard work that they do on a yearly basis. We're fortunate that North Haven Fire Department provides EMS services as well and has done so effectively since the 80s. So this past week, during a award ceremony at Yale, we want to wish congratulations to firefighter paramedic Matthew Ackerman and firefighter EMT Scott Garbati. Both of these firefighters were honored for successful resuscitation of a cardiac arrest patient that occurred on June 9th, 2017. The best part of that award ceremony was that the patient was able to join them on stage, was discharged from the hospital shortly after the event and lives to this day.
Wow.
And wanted to personally thank them. So we thank them for their job and glad that the patient's doing well.
Wasn't Ackerman a recent hire?
Sorry?
Ackerman, wasn't he a recent hire?
Ackerman is a recent hire, yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
We receive communications from residents, throughout the year, thanking the fire department, and we have some Heart Save Awards presentations that we make to our paramedics and EMTs. They all do a phenomenal job, and many residents are deeply appreciative of the effort of the paramedics and EMTs that we have in our town. And certainly, those that work with AMR, as the chief indicated, during the explosion, they came to our aid. So we have a deep appreciation for all of the EMTs and paramedics and the work that they do. Chief, the parade?
Parade is this coming weekend, and I'll have information out to the commissioners as far as where to line up. We're possibility might be marching in a different location than we have in the past. I'm working on that right now, so
Okay.
expect to have some clarification for you shortly.
Okay. Anything else for the good of the department? Here are none, I'll accept the motion to move into executive session. Do I hear a second? Second. Any question on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
So approved. I'd like to reconvene the Tuesday, May 22nd, 2018 North Haven Fire Commission meeting. I'd like to ask if there's any public comments, any further business coming before this commission. Here are none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Do I hear a second? Any question on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
This meeting's adjourned. Thank you very much.
The preceding program is brought to you in part through a grant from the town of North Haven. Watch town meetings or other videos on demand at nhtv.com.